An article came out in the Washington Post, and it was about how some Gen Z influencers are unhappy and turning against Biden over a variety of issues. Specifically, Gen Z content creators say they feel disaffected and betrayed by Biden's positions on an array of issues, including the war in Gaza, the climate crisis, and the president's decision to support a potential TikTok ban. Now listen, TikTok ban, Gaza, I get it. But the climate crisis, President Joe Biden has done the most for climate change than any other president in history. And I'm surprised that Gen Z, that probably cares the most about the climate crisis and that is likely going to be the most affected by it, knows the least about what President Joe Biden has done. And that's okay, because there's a lot of noise out there, and I realize that not everybody follows the news or what's going on with government as closely as some others do. And so I thought it would be a good idea just to lay out a handful of things that President Joe Biden and Democrats have done to address the climate crisis. And again, this isn't meant to shame anyone, it's meant to inform you. Ready? Let's go. On Joe Biden's first day in office, he signed an executive order rejoining the Paris Agreement, which Trump had left, signaling a strong commitment to international cooperation on climate change. He also signed additional executive orders pausing new oil and gas leasing, as well as doubling offshore wind production by 2030. He also established the National Climate Task Force to coordinate climate action across federal agencies. And remember the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed into law in November 2021? Well, that bill includes substantial investments into clean energy, electric vehicle infrastructure, and modernizing the electrical grid to support renewable energy sources. The Inflation Reduction Act was another piece of landmark legislation that President Joe Biden signed into law in 2022 that allocates over $350 billion to energy security and climate change initiatives. And it also aims to reduce carbon emissions by 40% by 2030. And last but certainly not least, Joe Biden launched the American Climate Corps, which aims to mobilize a new generation, Gen Z, I'm looking at you, to fight against climate change. Now remember, we lost the House to Republicans in the midterms, which has really stalled all new legislation on climate action. And if Democrats retake the House majority in November, maintain the Senate majority, and hold the White House, we can continue to take action and make progress on climate change. And listen, I know that climate change is a huge issue and there's a sense of urgency to take more action. But as long as Republicans are in a majority, they will stifle our progress on climate change. And remember, as we're seeing and feeling the effects of climate change currently, Republicans still think it's a hoax.
The seas will rise over the next 400 years, 1/8 of an inch, which means basically you have a little more beachfront property, okay? All of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
He said the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese.
I'm not a big believer in man-made climate change. Thank you, everybody. I think something's happening, something's changing, and it'll change back again. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
97% of climate scientists agree that humans are largely responsible for global warming.
I don't know that it's man-made.
We'll have a little bit more beachfront property. That's not the worst thing in the world.
You'd have to show me the scientists because they have a very big political agenda. I can also give you reports where people very much dispute that. You do have scientists that very much dispute it. It'll start getting cooler. Nobody really knows.
And yes, you may disagree with Biden on a variety of issues. You may think he's too old and senile, but if Republicans and Trump take office in 2024, he will undo everything President Joe Biden did on climate. So are you willing to take that chance by supporting a third party or Republicans? Because I'm not.